most part. And if you notice that they are loath to make any relation from a spiritual perspective of civil instruction, when actually there's a spiritual side to it. And when you go into the spiritual side, they will start talking about religion, and it has nothing to do with religion in the concept that people have it.
Right.
It has to do with natural law, divine principles.
But about got to get back to brother Anton. Just Anton, if you're watching, I do have to return the call. But it reminds me, when he was sending us a lot of information, and brother Anton Maddox, and one of the things that he discovered, if I recall correctly, was the ecclesiastical nature, however, of what was going on in our so-called government structure. And because we were separating in our minds church and state, not seeing the connection, that was because it was taught that way. We didn't know that they had made the Bible, I forgot, there was a decree or something that the government did about the Bible. And the fact of the matter is that when you get into it, and another sister also who shared this, there is so much ecclesiastical language in it. If you don't know how, you don't know how to play chess, you get in the game and maybe you learned how to play checkers, but they're playing chess. And that's what the difference is. It's a different game.
You're looking at difference, right?
Yes.
And now even as you're leading into this shared informational analysis, right? You're applying, without the phrase, corpus delicti principle, and thus proper logistical examination of the minor parts of the social contract that makes up the body's politic and stabilizes justice within that structure. Failure to do so, because keep in mind, when you're starting, what is happening even in your shared presentment at this, while we're talking right now, is that you're leaning to common sense. It's not even a principle of what you call studied jurisprudence. It is common sense. And keep in mind, common sense is based in common natural law, which means it's common moral reasoning. Corpus delicti is rooted in that area. And thus it is natural law, not so much legislated. This is why this is always said, for those who study jurisprudence, the common law trumps the ens legis, or the Roman law. This is why, from a political perspective, such effort has been put forth to suppress people from knowing their customs, traditions, and their pedigree, in order that they would not consciously interject the common law to supersede the Roman or legislated law. And thus, this is how de facto operations has had such a strong root and given support by people who didn't know what they were doing. No different than, as an example, from a logistical corpus delicti analysis, right? When you see Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution for the United States, right? It says the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government, right? Very strict, very straightforward, right? And then look at how many people operating in the social structure will say our democracy. Not knowing that that's the de facto or the corrupt platform that was instituted officially, not unofficially, but officially February the 2nd, 1871, which is known as the Organic Act of Congress, which is a public admission of treason. However, the whole body of the governing body had been corrupted, and therefore they were protecting themselves in their own corruption. And therefore, the issue, just like for those who are examining the component parts or the corpuscles of the political body, know that manumission is the transfer of the rights and estates of the people from the different, what you call, slaveholders to the Congress themselves, who were slaveholders under the guise of government, under the guise of protecting the people's rights, when they were actually conglomerating a corporate operation. And therefore, the manumission was a transfer of the people's estate to a corrupted human trafficking Congress, who they thought were actually there to start protecting the people. And by virtue of that lack of knowledge of the corpus delicti principle, they didn't suspect that the U.S. Congress itself were master corporate slave holders, and they institutionalized it via the 14th Amendment, or what is commonly known as the Straw Man Article. You see? And yet it lives to today and goes unchallenged by most people, doesn't it?
So in terms of the act of, allegedly of freeing the slaves with manumission, they defined it as that.
It's a transfer.
It was actually a transfer and not a liberation, is what you're
transfer.
saying. Okay.
And yet the transfer, which is, it just, now, how would you know that? Basically, let's go back to what
you do. Yeah, because there's nothing in what they
defined. As a authoritarian, but what would it be? As a authoritarian,
well, it would be
you would simply look, what is manumission, right? Then you would go to congressional records, and you see the manumission is not a liberation of the people or freeing of the people, but a transfer from the hands of one
to another.
Now, keep this in mind when you comprehend that the common law stands for unalienable rights, which means rights that are divine, that are natural, that are, quote unquote, in layman's terms, God-given, that cannot be sold or transferred to another. Now you look at manumission, and it's a transfer of the rights of the people. And the people were deceived that they were being set free or liberated. Now, upon discovery, rule of discovery, not only a consciousness of a thing, but under the rule of what you would call the discovery or the information or dispensation of fact for examination of the corpus delicti, the body, etc. The corpuscles, right? People have become aware of things that are being talked about in recent decades, right? Like the bonding of the marriage certificate, the CDLs, and particularly with the QSIC number on the Social Security card, the red number, and most poignantly, the argument of the Sister QV trust issue and the quote-unquote birth certificate bonds that has been funding the United States Corporation company that went bankrupt. Now, a corpus delicti examination shows that, which means once people start looking at the component parts, it's all there. It's even documented. It's not secret. But because the people are taking imaginary views of what people are saying under the guise of racism and prejudice, which is really a diversion, not assumed to be, they never pay attention to what? The definition, the reality, the component logistical parts of the corpuscles that make up the body. When they do, they discover what? The straw man, don't they? They discover that the 14th Amendment that they've been leaning on does not secure the rights of anyone, but actually lists them as non-human or what is called artificial persons, right? Which means they have no rights under Constitution or treaty. In law, in international law, they would be referred to as persons held under wardship tenures and technically stateless persons. And due to the fact that they're under a wardship or state ward property, legally, not lawfully, they're listed as quote unquote state wards, quote unquote state property, quote unquote minority class, quote unquote, by privilege, protected or not protected to a limited capacity on consistently required re-legislation of legislation, i.e. under civil rights programs that may be acknowledged or may be removed at any time according to the feeling or the attitude of the administrative clerk acting as judges, absent of constitutional due process or corpus delicti principle. So the point that I'm making to you is corpus delicti is actually goes beyond the issue only by examination when they talk about the principle of showing the non-breathing entity, etc. That it is a logistical look at the operations of governmental principle at its root, and thus is embodied in due process, trial by jury of your own peers, etc. Any fine that's over $20 must have a jury trial. Once you look at these fundamental parts of the corpus of the body, politics, right? It's easy to see how people are violated every day, and it never dawns on them that these people in government are absolute criminals, not mistaken, absolute criminal enemies of the people. And if the people would invoke what constitutional principles, corpus delicti, these people would have never been able to pack these private commercial prisons and POW camps and fund them by virtue of the people. And then you take the very same targeted people and pack them in there in by process, right? Execution, killing families, killing economies, all of which go against the international rule of genocide, prevention of the crime of genocide. And this is why even when people are looking at the international rules relative to the crime of genocide, they're thinking all the time that they're looking at what we'll call the destruction of the corpuscles or the corpus of the physical body, when it includes anything done to injure, to harm, to separate, etc. And yet you'll see them separating children without due process. How have they been able to do that to families and then people not having any remedy? It never dawns on these people in general that the persons doing this are human traffickers, because they still haven't caught in their mind that the U.S. Congress are human traffickers. That's the whole deal. It never dawns on the people. They can't wrap their heads around it, that their organization is human trafficking, human capital. And this is the funding of that order. And yet, just the fundamental applications of corpus delicti, would it reveal that to anyone with any intelligence just doing what you call elementary analysis?